All right, welcome to the Athletic Development Show. Special guest yet again, Pat Wilson here.
Hello, everyone. Welcome
There you
back. Yeah.
So we've just had a big week, a huge week of interviews. We've interviewed, 32 intern candidates?
32 in 3 days. So it's been an absolute madness.
Full on. It's the first time you've sat on the other side of the desk. What's it been like? What was your overall experience?
Yeah, well, I've been on both sides now. Having interviewed by yourself and now being the person that's running the interviews, it's definitely a big contrast.
What was it like when you were being interviewed? What was that? What's your recollection of that?
Oh, it was 4 or 5 years ago now. I lacked probably confidence back then. It meant a lot to me being here already, so it was very high pressure. And yeah, I thought I was a nervous wreck. You seem to think I did okay.
Yeah.
I left that thinking it was absolutely.
You think you bombed it?
I thought I bombed it.
Really?
I thought I absolutely bombed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was an interesting experience. And it's nice to know that you actually saw something from that, because I don't think I actually lived up to the standards that were set.
Yeah.
And now running them, it's very interesting.
It's full on, isn't it? What I saw in you was that you were a little stressed, like it's a full on situation.
Yeah.
But it communicated to me that you really cared. So it was like it was a pressure situation, but you weren't going to pieces. You knew you weren't crushing it, but even though you knew you weren't crushing it, you're holding it together. And that's actually a really good attribute. That's the ability to work well enough under pressure.
Yeah.
My
I
impression
think
was quite different.
I think the interview now, to where it's evolved and the changes I've made, is probably the most high pressure it's ever been. I think it's like if I didn't crumble then, I would most certainly crumble now.
It's so funny because when we were talking about your vision and everything you've been doing with the ADP, the Athletic Development Program in general, I'm ecstatic with what you're doing as the head coach, and the reinvention of the internship, making it even better, is amazing. But I did think after one of the interviews, because one of the things to me was, well, we need to make it lower pressure, we need to make it a little easier. We did not achieve that.
Yeah,
because it's sort of ramped it up. But I feel like it's a more informative pressure you've created, particularly which we can dive into a bit later, with the program that the interns have to write.
I think the setup that it is now has been designed to reward those who put the prep in. I think certainly. Now that it's you and myself being that panel interview, I think is an additional element to that. But there's time to prepare. There's a case study in it now. Yeah,
let's talk about. So it's still fundamentally us asking difficult questions of highly ambitious young interns. But I think the ability to do the case study has been a real game changer, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And my thought process behind putting the case study in was that we have a lot of graduates, we have a lot of people from different levels of experience. It's a nice way to gauge exactly where they're at. And it's also just a great talking piece to be able to discuss and provide feedback. And it's a big thing from us, is just seeing how well someone will actually take on feedback from their program. So I really liked implementing it. I thought it did well.
I think it was great.
We had mixed results with people's programs, which we'll get into, but I liked having it there, and I would certainly do it again. Yeah.
I love it too, because it's another way we can add value. Because probably one of the things that most bothers me about the internship is we get way more applicants than we can ever take. And every single semester we're rejecting people who are just great. They're not just like, it's not like we're just rejecting people who are mediocre or people who are good. We're rejecting actual great candidates because we just physically don't have the space to fit them in, because we can't have a situation where you've got 16 interns watching one athlete coach. There's sort of dynamics that have to be respected in the business. And so we're rejecting these cracking people, and I hate that. At least now I feel like we're giving them feedback on their resume, and then feedback on their program, and feedback on the interview. So we're giving them a bit of a leg up for whatever they do, as well as maybe sometimes I'll be a bit, I would rather be direct and risk having someone jump in the car, well, not jump, sort of slump in the car and feel terrible, but have a really hard think about what they're doing. Because I do think there's this mismatch where every single person that steps through the door says, I want to work in elite sport. I want to be the best of the best. I know it's super competitive, but I'll do whatever it takes. Like everyone tells the story of their own eliteness, but it's not the case that they're actually putting in an elite level of work. And so I think that the reality check's actually quite handy for some of them.
Yeah, no, I do like that. And I think, as we said, it's high pressure. Naturally, most people don't perform well or their best. I like that, given the case study and having some time to prepare for that, allows a piece of your work that shows you at your best.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we understand you're going to be nervous. We understand there's pressure. You might fluff your words. You might speak too fast, and that's okay. But you can balance that out by having a task that's actually going to have you, on paper, your best work. And I think that's really valuable to see both sides, because it might be the difference to coming in here and being nervous. Well, you've actually have a really clear idea of what you want to do. Your thoughts are smart, and you've laid it out really well. So, yeah.
And some people put in great work.
Yeah.
Really good work. Excuse me. I always end the internship interview process thinking, would I have got in? Would I have got into my own internship?
What do you think?
No. I would, like, young me was an idiot. You know, like me in his early 20s, just walking around bumping into stuff. Like I would not have gone well. I would have been nervous out of my brain. If I was smart enough to know how much benefit this would have had, that's a big if.
Yep.
If I was smart enough at that point, I would have been so nervous I would have stuffed it up. And I wouldn't have prepared adequately. I don't think it's not until you get in the room and it's almost like you can see it in people's eyes, oh, I really needed to prepare this really well. Yep. Just from, like the layout of the program, like just making everything as good as you can make it.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Like, we're obviously not artists, but we all, I think, as coaches, enjoy that level of creativity. That's why we write programs, and I think that's partly the reason people enjoy that so much. And we don't need the most prettiest program with the most effort in formatting, but it does need to be presentable. And there wasn't any criticism on the program itself, I don't think. Like, we're not judging you based on how well your program was, but how did you just approach the task?
Maybe there are a couple.
A little bit.
We'll get to that.
A little bit. However, if it's presentable, it reads well, it's structured nicely, and it's been completed in the set time, it says a lot. So
you made a really good point in one of the interviews, and it was just around the presentation of a particular example. And it was, look, you've got to hand this program to the athlete. What do you want the athlete to think of you when you hand them the program? And I thought that was really good, because it's not good enough just to have a few dot points.
No.
It's really obvious that you wouldn't just scribble down some stuff on the back of a newspaper and say, here's your program. That's obvious.
Yeah.
But at the other end, it's not as obvious. That you should have it well laid out so the person can just pick it up, read it, understand it, and think, wow, this coach is a real pro.
Yeah, this coach cares. They've put some time in behind the scenes to help me. I think that says a lot for the buy-in and building that trust with the athlete is, okay, this is great. I know exactly what I need to do. Some effort has been put into this. Yeah.
And that trust, that's such a huge piece that is the currency, really, particularly in the early days.
Yep.
Yeah. I reckon we should talk about the actual programs themselves.
Yeah. Let's do it.
So what was the biggest surprise for you looking at the programs?
Well, I think
we live in a bit of a bubble here.
Yeah. It's the context for the listeners and viewers is that a case study was presented to the interns, and it was a 16-year-old basketballer looking to improve their vertical leap, acceleration.
Female,
no injuries and no gym experience, and was in the general prep phase. And we saw a lot of different things, all not tied into what you would expect from that case study. I think certainly people, in an attempt to impress us, would probably overdo the programs to make it look smarter or than it needed to be. When in reality, it doesn't need to be that, does it?
No, fundamentals done brutally well. Yeah. I definitely think the Instagramification of strength and conditioning is a really interesting trend, because we saw a lot of stuff that would look really cool. Like we had one which was depth jumps, which is like a level. What is it? Level 6.
It's high. It's high. Yeah.
Like it's certainly not square one. Depth jumps and trap. We saw a bunch of trap bar jumps. More than I never would have imagined so many people would think a good starting point would be jumping with a weight. That's like square one.
Yeah.
And I mean, trap bar jumps are brilliant, but it's like the analogy I would make is, you know, if you're teaching how to kick a footy, you don't start with torpedoes from 70 meters. You know?
Yeah.
Or in basketball for our international audience, you don't start with half court jump shots. You know, you start under the basket, you work your way out, you build your technique. So there was a lot of really, really high level stuff thrown into the programs. And I think that was the most interesting thing, that not many people had the courage to go basic, well ordered, simple stuff. And the ones that did those programs, they were sensible starting points.
They were sensible, and those who did that had a good understanding of where that program needed to go. If you start at level 5 or 6 with those plyometrics and you're not respecting that continuum, there's nowhere to go. There's definitely been a few steps that have been skipped, and the best programs were those that started from rock bottom that would progress into where it needs to go, because those individuals had thought about progressions. They'd thought about the longer process into more of a specific phase, and it was definitely a catch. A lot of people did it really well, but it was designed to catch people out, and that's exactly what it did.
Yeah, it was interesting. I as you've been talking about, I think the good programs are built on a first principles basis up. And it's like, okay, what does the athlete need? Where are we trying to go? Where are we at now? Let's build it up. But I would probably say the majority of the programs I felt were built backwards from what's some cool shit to put in the program that'll make me look like I'm a good coach. But the essence of a good coach is actually, if the most advanced stuff is what made you a good coach, then the best coach in the world would just prescribe 1,000 kilo squats. They would just go the heaviest, hardest, most difficult exercises. It's like, that's coaching's about the person in front of you. What do they need? Yeah, it was very interesting. And I also felt that I suspect almost none of them did the program themselves. Because I reckon they would have made a lot of changes. Like we had one where there was like 5 grip fatiguing exercises in a row, and so by the time you get to that 4th one, you are toast. You can't pick up a 1 kilo dumbbell.
Definitely. I think, the program in front of you and how that stacks up in real life comes with experience, definitely. But playing that out in your mind to see exactly how that would take its course is super important.
And in the gym, like giving it a go.
Yeah.
I remember I've always believed on doing everything I give an athlete is an exercise that I have done. And I had one of those sliding doors moments where I saved my career by doing that. It was 2004, early 2004. We just won the national championship with the Boomers, the Rangers, faux pas, in the previous year. And I wanted to ramp things up. I wanted to go hard at it because we wanted to go back to back.
Naturally,
and so what I did was I did this great drill that I'd seen that Chicago Bulls used to do, where you had 60 seconds to dunk the ball as many times as you could, and you had to run out of the key every time. So it was a composite of kind of agility, wingspan, which I have and had none, and vertical leap, which I used to have a bit of. And so I had the guy at the stadium lower the ring down to a height I could dunk it at. And I timed it. I was like, I think this is a brilliant drill. I think the girls are going to love it. It's going to add some spice to the session, but I'll just do it myself, just to test it. And I did it. And on the 33rd dunk, as I was getting tired, and I really kind of reached up and tried to elevate to slam the ball, and I just felt this tearing sensation in my rectus abdominis and my upper ab. And I landed. I was like,
that's not good.
That can't be good. Who tears an ab? And I was in all. I couldn't move for 3 weeks. I was in agony. Have you ever had physio on an abdominal tear?
I have. It's not pleasant.
Do you reckon it's the worst?
I haven't had it on a tear, but
what do you reckon is the worst pain you've had from a physio?
I've had my diaphragm released.
Oh, okay.
That was pretty bad.
That's painful and personal.
Yeah,
that's like really,
you really got
more
to get
intimate
up and under. But anything abdominal to really get to where you need to be is firm and it's very direct.
So anyway, imagine the world in which I was like, no, this is a great idea. I'll do it. And our starting point guard tears their abs. Like that's not good.
No.
I think test everything.
Test everything. Make sure you do it yourself, and it's definitely having a standard to which you can actually do that program as well is somewhat important. And what we found as well with the interview is just physical standards too. So part of the interview is some physical work, some squats, some push-ups, some running. So very important that you can actually maintain a good standard there too, that it looks impressive. You need to be a coach and it needs to be impressive. It doesn't need to just tick the box.
No.
You need to own 3 reps. And you've spoken about the magic of just 3 reps.
The crisp triple.
That's it, the crisp triple, yeah.
Because the crisp triple implies that you've got another 10 to 15 in the tank. Like you do your first 3 so easy that it just looks like you could just do it for it. Like there should be, in your crisp triple, there has to be 0 sense of the third being harder than the first.
Yeah.
Even if the third is like 99% of the first, you've actually failed. You don't have a crisp triple. And if you've got that, it just implies it's kind of like infinite reserves of strength. And it just makes you look sharp and like you know what you're doing. But yeah, we had people who whose first one was poor enough that I wasn't sure they had a second.
Yeah, and to ask for a couple more.
just to see.
Yep.
Yeah, so and that demo piece, it can't be taught well enough at uni because it's just not the nature of the uni space. But that ability to demo really well, it's just you don't have time to write an essay on the gym floor. And also the athletes aren't going to respect you writing an essay about how you should be doing. They just want you to show me. So that was huge as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. No, very important that you can actually maintain and that crisp triple. Yeah, very important.
Do you think we should be mixing it up more? Because I worry that it's going to be too predictable now.
Yeah, there was a couple there where we banked up a few interviews and we were running a little behind time. And
they could see what was going on.
It's like, all right, I'm just going to take a few notes here. There's going to be a push-up and a squat coming. I threw an RDL in there a couple of times.
Yeah.
So I think, we're going to have to.
I reckon we might have to
shift it a bit.
Wild card it next time. Yeah, good. What were the other things that you saw from the process? Anything else that stood out?
There was a big thing for us, particularly running the internship, is we put a lot of time and energy into it. And those who respect and understand that we're putting a lot of development into them, having a clear understanding of why you're coming here in the first place, as opposed to just thinking it's a good idea and heard it's a good thing. There was a few times where I'd ask an individual, what exactly do you want to get out of this? You've got 22 weeks. What do you want to leave with this from? And how's that going to help you? So those who have a clear sense of what they want to do was massive.
Yeah, so far ahead.
For our decision, I would say. Yeah.
There was one interesting element though where them giving us a clear sense of what they wanted also was a bit of a contrast to the deficiency because it's still – I still can't get over how poor the general standard of functional anatomy is. I like that Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Is that a reference that still works? Or is it such an old show that it doesn't work anymore?
No, I think it works.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, play on. Play on.
So the idea being the very first question on the telly show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was always really easy.
Yep.
And so we lead in with a very, very simple question. And so the one we used was, and this will change over time, but it was, what's the role of glute max?
Yep.
And we had, people say flexion, which is just the opposite of its role. And we had all sorts of fuzzy answers at that. And you're like, well, that's unideal because it's the biggest muscle in the body. You should be able to talk about that well.
Yep.
But then as we go to some of the more complex questions, and they're not crazy complex. We're not talking about owning the muscles in the feet or the hands or, deep rotator cuff stuff. They're still relatively – because it's kind of like there's your absolute rock star muscle. Everyone knows what a pec is. There's no one that doesn't know what a pec is. So that's the real, high-profile muscles, hamstrings, pecs, quads. But even when you took a little step down to that kind of second tier, it was still amazing how many people just didn't know – where the muscle was, what it did, how it worked, or how to train it. And I'm just if you want to work in elite sport, you want to be the best of the best. You want to be the 99th percentile. You want to live in that pointy end of that pyramid. Then your knowledge and application to it, the acquisition of that knowledge has to be at the same level. If you want to be that good, you want to really know your stuff. And it felt to me like there was somewhere between a 5 and 35% differential between where people wanted to be ambition-wise and where their knowledge was. And I appreciate that's why they're coming here.
Yeah.
Like they want to get the leg up. But you should really go into these interviews having nailed that part of it.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of the time people come to us because they want to work on their programming, like through internships and the experiences that they want to develop their programming skills. And I really doubt how well you can program if you don't have a strong base of anatomy.
Yeah.
Like I'm not sure how that stacks up. If you don't know the muscles, you don't know where they are, how they work, and you can choose an exercise based off of what you already know. Yeah, I'm concerned for someone's prescription if they're writing programs and not knowing anatomy very well.
Well, because it prohibits you from being able to take, and I bang on this, and apologies if you're sick of this, to you as well, you hear this all the time. But if you do that, if you take that approach, if you don't have that base, you can't work up from first principles. You literally banned yourself from doing the most important thing, which is working your way forwards from those. So you can't really get a sense of what you need to do. You're just actually working backwards. It's like learning how to build a car versus just reverse engineering it, like just kind of an imitation of a car that doesn't actually work. Like it looks right. And a lot of the programs I think suffered from that a little bit. What were you like? I can't remember what your functional anatomy was like. What was it like when you were getting started?
It was still the format which we do now. So starting with an easy one and progressing through. As I said, I was nervous. You asked me what glute max did. I said hip flexion. Yeah, I did. So look, there's naturally going to be slip ups. And you're like, hip flexion? It's like, okay, he's questioning me. It's definitely not. Sit back. I had a breathe. I was like, hip extension. And then went on to support that by why that's so important. So I probably saved my bacon there just by going a little bit more detail. You asked some other ones, which I won't spoil just because we'll run out of muscles to name. And did okay. I think I was probably 2 from 3.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So not fantastic.
And did you go away and study up more subsequent to that coming into the internship? Like that gave you a bit of a sense of
absolutely. That was a bit of it was a wake up call for sure. Like I knew there was a level of I had to meet to be here first of all, and leaving that I definitely felt like I hadn't met that. So there was I need to step back. I need to brush up on the anatomy. And I was second year university at the time. So definitely had some more anatomy to go through, but it definitely should have been higher than what it was at the time. Yeah.
It's interesting to me how poor interviews are a predictor for success.
Yeah.
Like, Jacob was this close to not making it into the internship because of his interview. And, by his own admission, probably wouldn't have got in a more competitive year. And, he's grown into being my business partner and an amazing asset who makes me better and has been tremendous for the business. And you've grown into being the head coach of the whole thing, for God's sake. It's just really hard. Like you can't really get a perfect read on it. Interviews are just...
It's extremely challenging, and that's treat it as a job interview. I would treat it as a job interview in terms of the level of prep you would need. So me going through the internship, I didn't have a job interview. You didn't suddenly go, okay, you finished your interview, let's sit down and have a second interview for a job.
Yeah.
That was the foot in the door that led everything to where it is now.
Because you can see how you do it, how you operate.
Yeah. So obviously you only get one first impression. And sitting across from us really sets up everything beyond that. You definitely saw something to pay it off. And we do get a lot of questions from interns being like, what is your selective criteria?
Yeah.
What do you reckon the big ones would be? What are you seeing? Because sometimes the knowledge doesn't stack up.
I still come down to that sort of grit idea. That idea of you want and you'll eat broken glass to get there. You committed. It's a combination of committed and just sort of that understanding that it won't always be easy. And obviously you've got to be a nice human. Like if you suck to work with, life's too short to work with people who don't enjoy their company. But I think that grit, because if you have the grit, then you will tend to, if you can eat broken glass to get there, then the saying I really motivate athletes, what I'm always looking for is have I got them in a state where when I say you need to eat broken glass, they say, cool, what color? You know, like they're just
How much?
like, you know, at what point? What's the dosage? You know, like just to be clear, that's a metaphor. No one should be eating actual broken glass.
Please don't.
Not good. But yeah, I think that if you do that, well, then you'll accept feedback. You'll chase feedback. You'll focus on your weaknesses rather than just your strengths, and you'll be really good. Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. I'm really interested in. I want to give a couple of little tips in a minute, but before we do that, I think people sometimes have the impression that it's like, okay, decide to do that thing, do an amount of work to do that thing, get that thing. Like it's quite a short process. I'd like you to talk about your what you did to put yourself in a great position, because some people look at it and go, wow, head coach of a leading ADP at such a young age, geez, he's been lucky. You haven't been lucky.
Portion of it.
You know, like you've worked hard at it. Take us through. I'm really curious to hear your journey.
It's, as you said, like there's 3 dot points, and it's on paper it's very short, but everything in between is quite long. Like there's a long destination between starting, developing, and then now where I am. And it came over a bunch of things. Like this internship is not the only thing I've done.
No.
I've spoken before.
This was your first? Yeah.
Yeah, this was my first. This was actually my first experience into S&C, which opened the door and pushed into other directions with my time at North Melbourne and Melbourne United, which I'll touch on. But yeah, it started off at university. That second year was where I sort of had my eyes opened and thought I needed to get some experience here.
Sorry to interrupt. How did you find out about us?
It was from a colleague who I was working with at the time as a sports trainer, recommended Core Advantage. Okay. And I went down and did the research and had a look and was like, okay, what that person said matched up with the expectation and the professionalism that came across. So I was like, oh, that's where I need to be. And I've spoken about this in that first podcast I did in terms of my run through to now. But that led into here, and I was very green. I didn't know anything. And I was an intern for 11 months. But in that time I was also doing some work with Melbourne United as a sports trainer. And my thought process behind everything and the way it's worked out is the luck that I call it, because it's been tough, but everything that I set out to do is sort of tick the box. And I was attacking it from both ends with the S&C and then also being on that acute rehab, working closely with a physio. And my entry to anything I've ever done, Melbourne United or North Melbourne, was strap ankles and run water. Yeah. It's the easiest path to get in there. Yes, you have to take some time away and as you said, eat the glass.
Yeah.
Definitely ate some glass. But that just progressed into a point where you were able to show that you were a good fit for that organisation, that culture, that team, that you can then have a further discussion and talk about, okay, I have an interest in S&C. Is there an opportunity where I can explore that? And that's exactly what happened with North Melbourne. I went a full season running water on game days and strapping ankles as a sports trainer. Had an exit interview after one season and said, look, this is actually what I do during my day, working here with athletes, and like, oh, that's really interesting. Into there, pushed straight to assistant S&C the following season. And it just started from there. So at one point I was at university, I was at Melbourne United, I was interning here, and they were all just sort of funneling into this one point in time where...
You were also working at the same time.
Yeah, and I was also working...
For money.
Yeah, for money, to pay rent. So there was a lot of pieces to it. And then once university finished, there was quite I had a lot of momentum. And that's where I started to pick up hours here, came on as a casual coach. And in my first year out of my grad, I had 110 athletes here. I had managing 110 athletes individually programming for S&C, and then that just sort of flowed on. And I say to everyone and why I would promote the internship is the gym floor that we have out there is just such a breeding ground of diversity where you literally, it is what you make it. And that's, I think, having exposure to so many things at such a young, raw age pushed it to where it is now.
It's really out there has become, we've got this reputation still in the wider, sometimes in some pockets of the community of, oh, you're the basketball gym.
Yeah.
It's like, we were,
Yeah.
and we still like love basketball.
We love
and
basketball.
We do it very well.
Yep.
But we've got 26 plus sports, something like that training.
31.
31.
It's 31. Yeah.
Yeah.
31 unique sports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's and the aim for me was always I want to be like a private AIS or a private VIS where anyone that wants to help, whatever their sport, can get the help. And I feel like we've kind of hit that now, where it's much more in line with the original vision.
And being a young coach and having 31 unique sports, I was a soccer background. The amount of pressure that was there to then go above and beyond and learn about the needs analysis of that sport, actually watch it, to then write a program for it, I think was the pressure that pushed me to where I am now. Because you needed to be like, you couldn't fake it. It simply wouldn't work. So the pressure of knowing I didn't know a lot forced me to work on it and read up and touch on things. And I think that's kind of, in essence, why it sort of pushed me to where I am now. And like I always say, there is a bit of luck, and being head coach now, it's...
Well, yeah. I mean, and I wonder too, in a sliding doors moment where if reality were different, like if COVID hadn't happened, because the reality is all the footy clubs jettisoned a lot of their people, and you were
one of them,
unfortunately caught up in that.
Yep.
And, that gave you the opportunity to really focus on this because you weren't having – because, you can't focus on two things at the same time. The definition of the word focus is to be focused on one thing. And that probably was a forcing function that helped you to focus on this, which has ended up being hugely – like that's directly led to you being appointed as head coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sometimes I suppose that's a bit of luck in a weird way, isn't it?
Yeah, I think definitely. And it's sort of,
didn't feel like it at the time.
Definitely didn't feel like it at the time, but it was nice to know that was there, and it all happened in such a short amount of time just before that COVID hit. And yeah, it's going really well, and I'm stoked with how the program is progressing and the changes we've made. And as you said, like the program's probably now showing its true flavors of what it's always meant to be. We're absolutely humming along, and I would say that the athletes are very much enjoying it more, and that autonomous model that we've spoken about previously is starting to bear its fruit.
I still can't believe how wrong I had it. Like I had the right end point, but my roadmap to get there was so wrong. But it's great now, particularly with the new layout. That's so good. We had a great time, an intense day of arguing and getting the new layout spot on. That's just been great. Before we wrap up, one of the unfortunate, so the thing that I really dislike about the internship is you interview people, great people, and you have to say, sorry, you didn't make the cut. The thing that I dislike, at least as much as that, is we just don't physically have the time to respond in detail to all the people that didn't make the cut. Because at the moment, the internship, if you looked at the amount of hours it soaks up, it probably is at least 2 months of a full-timer's time. If you add it all up, all of the things, the administration of it, the delivery, all that stuff, it's a big chunk of a thing for something that we don't charge any money for. And I'm pretty intent on not charging money for it. And look, we have Catalyst and Traction, our online courses that take the content and have turned that into a product. So that's available for people that don't make the cut or live internationally. But we don't have the ability to give that individual feedback because it would then take another, at least I reckon, a week of giving all that feedback. So we just have to say, okay, best of luck, and if you don't make it, sorry. What are the pieces of feedback? It's probably just going to re-summarize what we talked about before.
Yeah, which is a good way to wrap up. Yeah.
What are the things that you think are most important to get? When people failed, it was because of these few things. What are those things?
I'd say definitely those who didn't treat it as if it was a job.
Yeah, number one.
I think 100% the professionalism of coming in and speaking about it. 2, do your research. Who is Core Advantage? And this can be applied to anyone. Like this is not necessarily us. I would say this is to anyone going for any job ever or an internship, is do your research on the person that you would be contacting to. Do your research on the company, what they're about, what they do. In doing that, you might actually find there's a bit of a loophole where you have a strength that you might be able to approach that. It's like, I'm not very good at this, but I'm very good at this, and I know this isn't something you offer. Yeah. That's a great point of separation. And that's all. I think the best people and the ones that are most memorable for the interviews is those who have a separation. And that's just one way of doing it. And I would also say definitely functional anatomy. Like we've touched on it already. Don't need to dive any deeper on it, but functional anatomy needs to be right up there.
Show how much you care by owning that stuff.
Yep. And show a willingness to learn. Yep. Show a willingness to learn and be comfortable taking feedback and ask good questions. Yep.
Yeah, nice. So if you didn't make it, it was probably because there was one of those things that you could be better at. If you're looking to make it in future years, dial those things in, and that'll put you in a great spot.
Yeah.
So for show notes for today, what do we need to have? I reckon Jacobs, he made a vlog about how he nearly didn't get in.
His experience. Yep.
That's a good one to watch. And he and I'd forgotten, but you mentioned we did a physical standards episode, and I think that the summary of that episode is if you want to be in strength and conditioning, you need to do strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
But it's worth diving into that as well. And the last one, we'll put links to our courses as well, because they're always a good option. Because you can, one of the other ways that we can make ourselves feel a little bit better at the fact that we have to reject so many people is that you can actually still buy the knowledge. So if you didn't make the cut, there is another avenue to get that learning via the online courses. And we've got a little mini one, the functional anatomy course.
Yeah, that's
if you want to just do one course, that tiny little one would be well worth it. Cool.
Awesome.
All right. I think that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's all from me.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Pat. See you guys next week.
Thanks.